Yeah, question for both of you. A couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, there was a series of letters in the New Haven Register reacting to the New Haven School District publicizing what looked like really good graduation rates from the high schools in New Haven. And the rates really did look good. I don't remember what they were, but they looked like good bragging rates of graduation, which means fewer dropouts and so on. And then just a couple of days later, it turned out from another series of letters that in fact those are not. I mean, the figures that the New Haven School District, as I understand it, gives out as graduation rates or as dropout rates are completely inaccurate. And the reason is that they only look, among other things, is that they only look at the last year. So they just look at the seniors. And they more or less count the number of seniors going in and then the number of seniors who drop out. But they don't look at the kids from the sophomore, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years. So all those kids that drop out as freshmen, sophomores, and juniors don't get counted in the dropout rate. So the dropout rate is something like twice what the district is saying it is. And then the last letter that I remember reading was a response from Superintendent Mayo saying that that's the way everybody in the state of Connecticut counts graduation rates, which said to me, well, okay, but so that's like, everybody's jumping off the cliff, and so we jump off the cliff, and anybody complains about it, whatever, then we just say, well, that's what everybody does. So I guess my question has to do with sort of generally what kind of job do you think that the public schools are doing for the youth in the city, and do you have any suggestions for how to make it better? I know it's a big question, but any piece of it that you want to grab?
Your turn, Jerry.
All right. Glad I got that one right. I did see that, and I don't know that it's accurate to say that everybody does the same thing. Part of the problem is that there is no overall approach that you have to take to this. So, and this is not just here in Connecticut, it's not just New Haven, it's across the country. There's no overall approach to the dropout rate. I read a study where they were talking about all of these ways of manipulating it. Because there is no standardized way of doing it, and I know we get a little antsy when we talk about standardization and education, some people, but because there is no standardized way of doing it, we have no way of actually doing a comparison to know where we really stand. But I think beyond even the dropout rate, which at this point I can't tell you where it really stands, and I think your thing that you're talking about the other people who should be added in is true to some extent, but some of those people probably shouldn't be added in because there are mitigating circumstances. But I think beyond that, it's not just the dropout rate, but it's what you actually come out of the schools with. I went back to school a few years ago at Southern, and there were some people from the New Haven public schools who had a high school diploma, but shouldn't have been out of high school. And so I think that what we need to start focusing on is, yes, the dropout rate, but what are these kids getting when they come out of school? Because if you have everybody actually getting out of school, but they're not being educated, what good does that do us? Now, another reason why that's important and how it relates to what we're trying to do at the state level is, if you look at what's happening in this state, you see all these articles about white flight and the brain drain, right? Well, what they never report in this is, because of that, the percentage of blacks and Latinos relative to whites in the workforce is increasing. And so if these people are not achieving, what's going to happen to the state? And so if you look at the reports, you have one out of UConn, and you have one called the Connecticut State 2020 report, which talks about this. We're in deep trouble. Because when I'm up at the state right now, what they're talking about is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, what they call the STEM fields. We can't read. How are we going to do science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? And that's just the cold hard fact. And the other thing that's important about this is, so now they're kind of beginning to pay attention to this a little. Partially because people such as myself have been up there saying, hey, I know you didn't really care about this so much because it was just in New Haven or Hartford or New Britain or one of those 5 cities that aren't so important to you. But you need to pay attention to it because the state is going to be broken. So now they're like, oh, well, we're going to have this this education thing, education program where we look at education and we have a panel of people who are going to look at it. And when I looked at who was going to be on the panel, it wasn't people from those communities. And part of the reason it's not people from those communities is because people from those communities aren't there right now talking about that issue. There are very few of us who are there right now talking about that issue. And in 5 years, when they've had the panel and it's done what it's supposed to do and it's made these suggestions and we're in an uproar saying, oh my goodness, you haven't paid attention to us, the problem really is that we weren't there in the beginning. So I know that's a long way to, to deal with what you asked, but I think it's important that we realize what it means to have these kids come out of school and not be properly educated. We cannot be happy if we go from 23% of the kids reading at grade level to 42. That's not acceptable. It's beyond not acceptable. It's criminal. And so, I mean, what I would do is pay attention to what's going on, be in the community, listening to the parents, listening to the community, and working, as I have been working, to make sure that people in other communities who don't necessarily have to deal with this issue understand why it's critical to them also, because that is what you really need to be able to do. Sometimes you need to be able to make your issue their issue.
Well, I think the Board of Education get a bad rap. I think everybody beat up on the Board of Education. Everybody has the solution to education. But when you look at these kids and you count in the numbers, you have kids that's, when they come in the 9th grade, when people look at from 9 to 12, but they never talk about the 5 or 6. And what do I mean by that? If a kid stays back, or if a kid, you got 900 kids that come in, just say Wilbur Cross, and then in 2004 and 2008, you got a graduating class of 400. How do you count the other kids that stayed back or administrative withdrawal or went to adult ed? I think that the Board of Education has a standardized curriculum from the state that they must go by. I mean, the mastery tests, and some of these kids are not prepared. Some kids that when they come to a classroom, they're more concerned about how they're going to get the next meal instead of what's 1 plus 1. Addition to that, we look at teachers, that we have 26 kids in a classroom, and it's very difficult for a teacher to focus on all them 26 kids. And even just recently, the state just did a cut of all the apparels. I think it was like 80 of them. So now the teachers are pretty much by themselves. Back in the 80s and the 70s, they used to have a pretty much different curriculum. Even now, the schools don't have home ec, they don't have woodwork, they don't have the voc wing. Kids learn different. And I think, like Mr. Jeremiah Wright said, that just because kids are different don't mean they're deficient. And I'm saying that we have teachers that when we look at the pay, most of the teachers, if you can go to the Branford, North Haven, sometimes you go into the inner city, some of these kids have to worry about taking care of their brothers and sisters or dodging from a bullet. And it's very difficult to learn if you're staying up all night, or if you got to help your mother or your father or your grandmother to help raise kids. So I just think we need to just look at the educational process, and if anyone has a solution that they think they have the formula, then I'm open for it.